many new places came in up in Martell, which seemed like a better deal at the time. In fact, what we had was almost a low-ball bidding between the county and the city, which wound up with some considerable economic distress to what was formerly a pretty robust downtown Jackson. The failure to work out revenue sharing and the willingness of different cities to compete with the county for the lease fees that could be charged in hopes of developing businesses there wound up with an infrastructure shortfall and ultimately not always putting things where they could best go. We only have one incorporated city in Calaveras County, and it makes plenty of sense for us to try to figure out what we can agree on and what kinds of things we might work out before it becomes as complicated as it was for Amador County once they had 5 or 6 incorporated cities to resolve. So my goal for this and my best and fondest hope is that we can find areas of mutual concern, begin to engage both at a staff level and at a policy level to anticipate and learn the lessons from Amador County and many others in the state and get a little bit ahead of the game before we complicate ourselves to the point of paralysis. So I want to thank the staff and the people from the public for coming today. And with those comments, I will turn this over to our Community Development Agency Director, Stephanie Moreno.
Thank you, Stephanie Moreno, Director of Community Development. I have a little bit of cold, and if you're lucky, I'll lose my voice before the end of the meeting. I'll do the best I can here. I'm really excited about this meeting. Tim Shear and I have been having some conversations about things that are going on between our 2 jurisdictions, and the thought was that we could have some discussions about some of the issues in common, not just about the general plan, but how we view how growth should proceed, how business development should proceed within the county, looking at the county as a whole rather than 2 separate jurisdictions. So that was what predicated this request for a joint meeting. We recognize that it's a pretty hefty agenda of topics that are here. We may or may not get through any or all of them. However, they were just points of discussion for us to have a discussion. I think it's even more important for all of you to take time to maybe share back and forth some of your common goals and mutual issues for the county and city so that staff has some direction as we move forward on project specifics, but also on our general plan updates that we can take back and work on. So that was the point of asking for this today. We passed out copies of the agenda. It's very brief to the public. I hope everyone has one. Now we have some more, I believe, if anyone needs one. Kathy's here in case anybody wants to do anything at the airport. I told her that in time.
Lynn O'Connor, General Plan Coordinator.
Bruce Morocco, Interim Planning Director, City of Angels.
Amy Augustine, Planning Consultant, Angels County General Plan.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask each of you, how would you like us to proceed? Would you like us to go beyond the agenda item? Would you like to have some discussion first about mutual issues, a free flow of conversation, or?
Well, I appreciate the staff work on this and would like to at least follow the initial outline of things that you've seen as of mutual concern. Okay. And if you would like, I'd certainly like to hear how you see each of these items as mutual and what kinds of work you could anticipate us doing together on them.
I can go down each bullet item very briefly then, to start with as to why they're on the list. The general plan update process was what initiated this initial discussion about a joint meeting, where we're at with our general plan update, how it affects the City of Angels. There was a request also that there be an update from the City of Angels on the status of their general plan update and issues that may be of effect to the county. So that was the primary motivator for the initial request for meeting. Relative to business development, There was some talk about the possibility of doing a countywide economic development strategy instead of us competing for tax dollars and commercial development within our jurisdictions, maybe coming to an understanding of where that commercial development is best sited within the county that would be mutually beneficial for our agencies. The possibility of doing a joint economic development element. The county has interest in doing one. Has not budgeted the money for that at this time, although there is community efforts underway to try to gather some of that information so it can move forward from the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Council. I think the City of Angels has other opportunities as well, maybe through CDBG or whatever, to do some economic development work. So the thought was that maybe we might want to talk about doing a joint element that addresses countywide business development. If the county and the city were to agree that certain areas should be targeted for business growth and certain kinds of business growth, maybe one area of the county for industrial type, heavy industrial, another for light industrial, certain areas, Angels is working on branding right now and may have certain kind of emphasis for development that it wants within its jurisdiction, but doesn't want to turn away opportunities for business, not knowing if the county wants to welcome them or not. Perhaps it could be that we engage in discussion about where that should occur and how revenue could be shared with that business development so that nobody loses as a result of it being placed in one or the other jurisdictions. Relative to the airport land use, one of the questions that Tam had asked me is what kind of development we had planned for the airport. Apparently there was a thought that there might be some commercial development in that direction. The Airport Land Use Committee is working right now on updating the plan for the airport. It was my understanding that the Board of Supervisors does not intend to put commercial development out in that area. It wants to protect the airspace and the land around the airport to make sure we don't have to move it at a future date. So we'd like affirmation that that is the county's policy, that we don't intend to have a building out there of commercial development. And if not, we'd like to know if there's a change of course in that so that we can address that in the general plan and that the City of Angels would know that as well, because it could affect some of their development impacts and their plans for their general plan. Traffic circulation along the Highway 4 and 49 corridors, as you know, anything that we do within the county has some impact on the City of Angels because they're a hub where most of the traffic flows through, up the Highway 4 corridor, over to Jackson, to all those commercial developments, or over to the City of Sonora, since we haven't captured those tax dollars yet. And so I think there was some requests for discussion about those issues. Residential development, the board recently came out publicly. There was a lot of press relative to the desire to have residential development and growth occurring in the town centers and to cut down on the amount of rural sprawl that we've been seeing. And the City of Angels would like to know how that is going to impact them as an urban center, if there's a desire for them, I think, to pick up some of that urbanization or that growth, or if we're planning on doing it within our town centers. So that would be a good discussion as well. What did we exactly mean by that, and how does it look like to the City of Angels so that they can respond to it and make sure that they have accommodated it. Relative to Copperopolis development impacts, I think Tim mentioned, obviously there's a lot of growth occurring in the Copperopolis area. You're talking about a population base of 40,000 people over the next 20 years as far as the plan looks, and much of that traffic, especially given the current state of business in this county, is going to come up this Highway 4 corridor into Angels. And so how is that going to impact the City of Angels, and do we have any ideas on how that's going to play out? So those are the thoughts that went into bullet items. This is by no means an all-inclusive list. If there's anything that anyone else would like to add to this, hasn't been addressed, we can certainly add.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that it'll be hard to give full measure of consideration to any one of these, let alone the entire. So to just set forth today's goals, my hope is that what we'll have is a preliminary discussion on each one of these to get a sense from the assembled combine as to what areas of cooperation we might engage in, and possibly give some instruction to staff to commence the development of options and actions. So this is, again, to just get a sense of the council and the board's views of each of these. And if it's all right with the people assembled, I'd like to take it in the order that we've got here in the staff report. And I'd also like to make sure that if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to comment, that we can do that as we go item by item. So to start with, on the general plan update process, do people see points of cooperation and collaboration, and if so, what, and how would that look between the parties?
First of all, on behalf of the mayor who's out of town, I think I want to commend the board for organizing this meeting, and it is certainly welcome, I believe, by the city as an opportunity to work together. One of the elements that kind of jumps to my mind immediately is how the city's approved general plan is integrated into the county approved general plan, and what the exact process is for its, I guess I'm saying technical integration.
All right, that's a good start. Bob?
Mr. Chairman, what the board has traditionally done is literally adopted the city's sphere of influence as our general plan for that area until it was incorporated. So if you look at our current general plan, there's an area that has quite a large area right now that is your sphere of influence, and the county has actually adopted the land use policies that currently exist in that area and have applied them for any development that comes to the unincorporated counter until such time, obviously, as you annex. And I would anticipate the board would do the same thing this time around. I would like to compliment the city, first of all. Last time I looked, you had significantly reduced that sphere, which I think is a good thing. It gives us a little bit more working room around you. But I would anticipate that would basically feel same way. We would literally adopt your plan as our plan for the unincorporated areas.
I have a question for staff. One of the things that we've noticed in some of our community plans is that we're not always using the same language. I'm wondering whether we've integrated terminology between the two entities.
We are working on developing uniform language, particularly in areas of density and definitions for each of the community plans and the general plan. And when it is presented to the board for adoption, they will be uniform. It is possible that we need to look at that uniformity between the county and city to at least have a matrix to show how they line up if indeed we can't use the same language. We are trying to, we have a model, U-Plan model that is being worked on for modeling purposes. It's a joint effort between, it's a Caltrans project between Calaveras, Amador, and Alpine counties. And there has been some work on making those definitions uniform. We're trying to match up in some respect to those. So that's kind of our grand zero point on finding where to go.
Okay, other comments from the board or council? I'm sorry, Andy?
Just wanted to get everybody on the same page in case anybody's new to the process. The Angels Camp General Plan was a four-year process to draft it. So we basically have had a draft since 2006. Established land use designations, our new land use designations and whatnot. Our administrative draft EIR is completing staff review. It should hit the streets around April the 1st and go to the clearinghouse. So we are quite far along in our process. including our economic development element. However, we do continue to have a lot of flexibility in the plan about working with the county on specific things. And as we go through this list, we can fill you in on what's already in the general plan that we are hoping to have adopted prior to the end of June of this year.
Thank you. Also, Stephanie mentioned the U-Plan process. That was it's a pilot project initiated by the Amarillo County Transportation Commission, of which Alpine, Calaveras, and Tuolumne County are participating in it. It's our first real opportunity to try to get some semblance of sameness with respect to land use designations. It is a rough cut, though. What's high density in the city is different than high density in the county. So through this U-Plan process, we are actually trying to get a handle on relative densities with respect to at least residential land use and also commercial and industrial as well.
And before recognizing Mr. McSorley, okay, all right, never mind, Tim?
Good afternoon, Tim McSorley, Executive Director of the Council of Governments. And I just want to add a little bit to what both Stephanie and Bruce have said about the U-Plan. It is a land use model. The designations that are in the U-Plan are not, strictly speaking, I won't say consistent with the same types of definitions that are in the general plans. There is a use type that coincides with the actual land use designations in both the general plans. It is a very useful tool. We anticipate being able to use it for the county's general plan update and run different land use scenarios. Bruce, I think there was the first or second meeting that he was at here just a couple of weeks ago. We welcomed all of our partners into this process. It also links to our transportation model. So we can run different land use scenarios, see what the impacts are on the transportation system. So a little bit of clarification, but very excited about being able to do that.
Thank you. Marita, did you have a question?
Amy, just how many elements is the Angel plan going to have?
We have 12.
You have 12, okay. Considering how far along the city is, because I thought there should be some marriage between the county circulation and the city circulation, as an example, and that might be a traffic circulation, which really extends beyond maybe the 449 corridors. But how then, as planners, would you say, could we marry it, because you're going to do your EIR and we haven't even. Plus, I do want my colleagues to notice the City of Angels has been 4 years in the process. I just thought.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Basically, we've been working with staff and with the Council of Governments from the start. Therefore, the Regional Transportation Plan was adopted in 2007. Mary's proposed to do other things already. We have a couple projects internally in the city that we're going to focus on, much smaller projects, but that's basically the bottom line there. So a lot of that we have been working together. We've been working, we've been sending over our land use maps over to the county for at least projections for traffic modeling, that type of thing. So we've been coordinating with that. And I just wanted to slip in on economic development. I see several things here that would
Thanks. While we seem to have segued a little bit into economic development, I'd like to mention that the Board of Supervisors is holding a study session on economic development at its next meeting. I believe it's scheduled for 1:30. Is that correct? Next Tuesday, the 18th. Hopeful that we can invite all of our colleagues and try to continue this dialogue and get more in depth on the subject of economic development, with theories about how to accomplish that. Certainly Angels Camp, by having an element in their general plan, gives us a benchmark to try to reach ourselves if that's the desire of the Board of Supervisors. And then the integration of those becomes even more important. From my perspective, to avoid the Amador County situation in which one entity may eviscerate the other accidentally, or for that matter, with malice aforethought, seems to be something that we would want to avoid. And so specifically, where do we put our high-density housing, and can we have jobs that are nearby but not in land use conflict? Where will we put light industry? Where do we develop more intense commercial activity? These are things that involve all of our planning processes. And when we've got two parallel but non-intersecting efforts, chances for an accident would appear to be heightened. So I would certainly hope that all our colleagues could be present for the study session on economic development. I would hope also that Angels Camp might, since you've actually got an element that you're well on the way to adopting, if you could, as part of that agenda, share your thoughts with us. I think that might help inform the discussion.
One of the things that Amy said that caught my attention is locating heavy industrial within 10 miles of the city. The key areas that we looked at are not within 10 miles of the city. There's some areas in the Copperopolis area that are well suited for heavy industrial, and then off of Full Station Road where we have the road and the other places in place. Now, if this is what we need to know, do you want us to identify another area that might be more suitable to have a mutual benefit to city workers and city residents within 10 miles? Then we would need to take a look at our land use planning and how we designated that. So those are things that we would like to hear from you as part of the conversation.
Well, one location that came up already from at least one participant was the question of the airport. And you began the discussion with saying that we had something of a policy to leave that open for possible expansion. But we do have the leading expert on airports right among us. I would love for you to speak to that as soon as I...
We need to make sure that we have everyone that speaks sign in as well, too. Not Kathy, she's part of staff, but when the public starts to come up, we need to sign the roster's name.
I certainly want to make sure that, I've noticed that airports in some areas have become a leading economic development indicator, that some places have capitalized enormously on airports and some have not. I'd be interested in our approach to this so far, and then ask that people on this panel comment on it. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. We have just reinstated our airport land use commission just because this type of thing is happening all over the country to airports. And the airport land use compatibility study that we have going on now, I got a grant from the state and we've got people working on that right now. We have a consult company doing that. There are the sphere of influence that this was done once before in about 86. And the sphere of influence of the airport is about 5 mile radius, something in that neighborhood. It's irregular. The FAA dictates some of what we can do around right close up to the airport. We have heights and distances and all that kind of stuff that we have to be familiar with. In our particular case, we have Stevens Ranch goes all around us. At this point in time, that does not lend to any industrial planning at all, because that's, I mean, they're real ranch people. What happens when the folks die and the kids take over? You know, we don't know what's going to happen down the line. Larry Thompson is on our Airport Land Use Commission, and we were talking about this out at the airport the other day. We have to look long range. We have to look past my life and my kids'. You know, we've got to get things pretty well set up. One of the biggest problems that we have is, or challenges I should say, is the infrastructure. We don't have, we have a small piece of ground to begin with. We're 92 acres out there. Some of that's BLM land. We don't have public water. We don't have public sewer. And there is the biggest problem or challenge that we face with airport development. I'm constructing 22 new hangars on a pad I just got a grant to have done out at the airport. That's about going to fill up all the hangar space that we can build out there because of the terrain. As far as expanding the airport, that's always a wonderful idea. But in order to expand, you've got to buy land from the neighbors, and right now that's not an option. We're 3,600 feet. When we built this airport, that would accommodate 95% of general aviation aircraft. It still will. General aviation aircraft is becoming smaller, not bigger. So I don't see the length as being a real problem. We could go as far as 4,000 feet. The cost of getting that extra 400 feet would be prohibitive. If we went any further than that, then by regulation with the FAA, we have to widen the airport, widen the distance between the runway and the taxiway, widen the taxi lane, because then you're subject to bigger airplanes. So we really have, unless we do real major stuff, we have what we have at our airport. And how about if I brag a little bit? Everybody in California thinks we have the greatest airport going, you know, because I only talk to 3 people. We do have a great reputation for what we've managed to accomplish at our airport with the FAA, with the state people. They're solidly behind what we do out there, and the fact that I have a supportive board and CAO here in my county has just made my job much easier. Other airports don't have that. So, you know, I've been very lucky that way. We did put a new well in 2 years ago, and that suffices now. We don't have basically fire capacity to put out big fires. We don't have the water for that, or the electricity. If we put a big tank out there, you still have to have electricity to get that water. So because we're close to San Andreas and the fire department and the forestry, this has never been an issue. As far as getting more industrial things going on out there, we've always wanted a restaurant, you know, and things like that. But without infrastructure, we're pretty limited. When they come back with the airport land use compatibility study, they're putting together numbers and stuff now, and the consultants will come up and meet with Stephanie and Bob and I and our airport land use commission again, and we'll update the plan and then turn it over to you guys to make sure it questions? Does that help kind of clear up our situation out there?
Mr. Chair, I think that it's important to know the distinction. Kathy's talking about expansion of the airport facilities as opposed to other properties coming into industrial.
That's exactly right. Thank you,
Right.
Stephanie.
Just one-
That is true. I'm talking about my 92 acres, and that's all I'm talking about. What you do around the airport is somewhat dictated by the Airport Land Use Commission, and what we and the Airport Land Use Compatibility Study will dictate the types of things that can be done. Like you're not going to put a church or a bunch of kids under the pattern.
Like,
She's a pilot.
Yeah, the pattern. Well, I outlined the flight plan, but I'm thinking of just the pattern around the airport. We have to have a place for airplanes to go if something ever happens.
Might I ask you how much contact the Airport Land Use Commission has had with the Angels Camp City Council and Planning group? Has there been a lot of dialogue there?
Actually, let me tell you what the Airport Land Use Commission really consists of. Back in about 89, I believe, 90, maybe something like that, the state dictated that that every county would have an Airport Land Use Commission to oversee the use of the sphere of influence at the airport.
Which is a 5-mile.
Approximately. I mean, it's all, whatever that group figures out, and this is what we figured out. If there was no problems, back in those days, if you had an airport which was not subject to a lot of problems with the neighbors and all that, then the Airport Land Use Commission fell back into the planning department. And that's what happened with us, because we're so far out of town, and there was never any problem. Well, a few years ago, or a couple of years ago, we decided that because of our growth in this county, that we do need a watchdog for the airport. Other counties, and that's why the state was so adamant about giving us a grant so that we could get this compatibility study done again. They will, these consultants will be contacting the city, the county, having meetings, and all of this. That's all part of what the study will consist of.
The committee actually has City of Angels reps, I believe, too.
Yes.
Yes.
County reps, and then county planning provides staff.
The commission is made up of two people from that the county appoints, two people that the city council appoints, and I went to the city council and got these Larry Thompson and Bruce Silva. These are people that had some planning background and land use background, and I felt that they would be good in keeping us all of our needs in mind. So, and the airport appoints a couple.
Well, I think that's certainly a sign of progress to get the airport interest defined. And now the question is, how can we integrate those interests with those that are being expressed by the City of Angel, and maybe as well the county effort to do a general plan. It strikes me that there's certainly a wide area for discussion that's implicated by the conversation so far here, and I'm wondering what we might do to pull these efforts into some coordination. I think Amy had the comment here.
Yeah, from a purely practical standpoint, you have maps up there of proposed sphere of influence, and you'll notice that heading up north, Highway 49 towards San Andreas, the city is actually proposing to pull that sphere of influence back and further. So just from a purely practical standpoint, we're not actually in the Airport Land Use Commission and the county. So
Does that mean we have no need to coordinate
lot of development around the airport, because we know that's what usually causes airport. We start getting complaints, we start getting issues, people start wanting the airport to be somewhere else. We wouldn't want to set up the airport for having to look at an alternative location if one even exists at some future date. There's also our desire as staff, and hopefully the board will affirm this, that we want to keep rural areas in between our growth centers, so that we don't end up having the City of Angels and City of San Andreas, or Town of San Andreas, butting up against each other like they do in the Bay Area and metropolitan areas. So the airport can help serve that purpose as well. By having a buffer around the airport, it keeps the greenbelt also between the two jurisdictions. So if you're talking about, if the city would like to see an industrial area outside of the city limits, we'd want to make sure that it was far enough away from the airport, didn't impact airport operations, but we'd certainly like to look at an alternative site other than the airport to accommodate those needs, because we didn't know that that was, or hadn't paid attention to that request. Does that make sense?
Yes. Bill? Well, Ms. Lust, did you still have comment? I'm sorry, I'll take it to you.
Just listening to the conversation here, it's apparently obvious in the vein of this conversation that, first of all, in my opinion, I think industry may be the wrong term, more like commercial activity, a little less intense than industrial might be, but there is the absence of your heavy industrial infrastructure out there, which would limit that sort of activity anyway. And the issue of keeping a buffer there for the air travel, so that you don't wind up having things conflicting with your air travel. In other words, things in the line of sight of your runway and so on and so forth. It seems to me that the growth out there, should there be growth, should be centered or at least directed toward support of air travel. And in that vein, you can have people travel here, the people that I've known that have traveled here to do business, they're looking for transportation, they're looking for perhaps a meeting location, perhaps a place where they can get a decent meal, or service to their aircraft, or things of that nature. And I think it sounds to me like there's room there for expansion of that, which would contribute to our economy without having to go into some other manufacturing or service industry.
Right. That's right. Thank you, Bill. The area right along Highway 49, as you come off of Carroll Kennedy Drive, across the street, and as you come down the hill, if you're on the right, there is some commercial property identified there. And other than that, on the airport itself, it's all aviation stuff up there with the exception of a lawyer. But we could, but there's options, but without water or sewer, it's pretty hard to do anything right now. So, and I'm sure that the consultants will, when we get together with them, where all these things can be brought out, they'll have some recommendations too.
Russ?
Well, I had a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction when I heard Stephanie say that as a board, we kind of discussed the policies about not having development around the airport. As a pilot, I have observed many airports, and Livermore comes to mind, where there are robust industrial, not industrial necessarily, but manufacturing associated. It doesn't even necessarily have to be associated with aviation. It's just that the product that you're producing, you put a whole very large value shipment in the back of your Cessna 172 and take it to Sacramento and connect it to an air carrier. Our airport is wonderfully situated, as being up on top of a hill. You don't have the normal height limitations that you are faced with airports in the valley. You mentioned that commercial development, or commercially zoned property down Carroll Kennedy Road. I would certainly encourage your airport land use committee to think in terms, think out of the box a little bit about citing some compatible small little park down there, and don't let the absence of infrastructure stand in your way. Make that be the.
Oh, no, no, that's
You
right.
can have satellite facilities for sewage treatment. You could have a common well that could serve a whole small.
If you have water,
Well, we had some well drillers here.
yeah, yeah.
And where are they now?
And that's not it, yeah, you're absolutely right, Russ, and that's what, one of the things Larry pointed out to us at the last meeting we had with the consultant. We've got to think long-term. We can't just decide what's good for the airport the next 5 years or 10 years or even 20 years. We've got to think long-term.
We've got several people wishing to speak. Tom first.
Let me just give a couple comments on this side of it, since we're on the airport. I'll start there, but I think the most incompatible use of the airport is sticking residential around it. We formed the airport land use map. We formed the airport land use commission. I think the airport provides a great opportunity for development as long as it's compatible with the airport. And compatibility to me is the key. I would disagree with Russ that let's not let infrastructure hold us back. I think infrastructure should hold us back and is holding us back, and we had better address infrastructure if we want to have quality development. So I'll pass on from the airport and talk about circulation a little bit. There's two roads that come from the county that I think in the future will generate significant traffic. The county roads that come into the city and then become city roads. Obviously, we have the state roads. I'm not referring to them. I'm basically referring to Murphy's Grade Road, which is going to funnel all the traffic from development along Murphy's Grade Road and French Gulf Road and bring it right down Murphy's Grade Road, right into the high school and then into 49 at the intersection, to have to take a right to get to the Highway 4 bypass, or take a left or right if you want to stay on 49 going to Sonora or San Andreas. I personally was very disappointed that the Highway 4 bypass design, we did not have a connector to the Murphy's Grade Road. I think in the future we are going to have a connector from the Murphy's Grade Road to the Highway 4 bypass. And I think the county and the city should talk about that a little bit with Caltrans, and if we have to form a benefit base along Murphy's Grade Road and French Gulf Road, I think that should be done before a lot more future development occurs. In order to do that, we need to know the cost of an interchange there or a connection to the Highway 4 bypass there. I argued long and hard with Caltrans to at least design the overpass of Murphy's Grade Road so that we could do a connector in the future. And I don't think they even incorporated a design for a connector. So that leaves me with a lot of concern because in time and over time, the traffic count on Murphy's Grade Road will continue to grow, and it's going to go right into the city, right, in my opinion, where we don't want it to go into the city. Secondly, we're going to see, I think, in the future, and we are seeing some now, growth along Dogtown Road, which is a county road, and then it comes in to the city. I know the city is working on an intersection where Dogtown currently, or realigning the intersection where Dogtown currently comes into 49, and that may provide some relief for that intersection. I think at some point in time we need to show a connector road from Murphy's Grade Road over to Dogtown Road. That's basically probably mostly outside of the city limits, or maybe even be partly within the city limits. I don't think we can use Gardner Lane as a connector road, and we're going to have to put something in that shows the connector road so that as we get future development, we can have future development put that road into place. think those two things need to be both in the county and the city circulation elements. I agree with, I think it was Amy's comments to initiated this discussion. I would personally be very supportive of the city if they did not include industrial within the city limits. I think the county needs to find some industrial sites that make sense. Clearly, the two that have always been highlighted in the county is the old cement plant down at Pool Station. Another has been the toy line area, particularly when we had a railroad, or at least a railroad track servicing it, which we no longer do. But that was identified as clearly as an industrial area. I'm not quite familiar with Stephanie's referring to in copper, but if you took a look at the copper line tailings, et cetera, where we already have some issues, and we could do some maybe industrial development there to clean up the environmental issues of the tailings. I think that's worth entertaining. But to me, we can do economic development elements in our general plan, but what's holding back economic development in this county is infrastructure. We don't have sewer infrastructure to handle it, we don't have the water infrastructure, and we don't have the road infrastructure. So if we were going to be serious about good quality development, then, what we should have in the general plan is a sewer, water, and road, well, we have a road element, a circulation element, but we need to get the infrastructure right, or the development is going to be rural, sprawl, haphazard, small and inefficient. So that's my comments today.
Thank you, Tom. Tim? Yes, back in 1991, which quite a few years ago, Applied Development Economics did a study for the county and the city looking at where development should go, and there was a node in Valley Springs and in Angels Camp where it was looked at that those would be central areas for commercial development. One of the things that we've been talking about, and we've talked about over the years, council has just got done talking about it, no decision made, and we need to continue with talks, is about what I believe is the most imminent concern that we have in Angels Camp and Calaveras County as far as economic development. That's not the industrial side, but retail in the form of large format retailers, otherwise known as Walmarts, Targets, Home Depots, Lowe's, and those kinds of things. The city has experienced a lot of pressure recently. We've had different contacts by large format retailers kind of checking us out, looking at possibly locating in the city and so forth. So one of the things I was talking to Stephanie about was I don't know where we're going to go in the city, whether or not we're going to roll out the red carpet or whether we're going to hunker down and try to keep them out. That's a decision that we're still working on. But certainly it does have an impact on the heritage, the character of the community, and all of these elements that we're talking about, like traffic circulation and so forth, infrastructure, that becomes very much a central topic of conversation when you're talking about these large format retailers. One of the things I was talking to Stephanie about was if the city is in a position where we said no large format retailers in the city and we took steps to basically try to, if you will, vaccinate ourselves from them, because a lot of times you can't necessarily prohibit, but you can do things to regulate and maybe make it a little less enticing for a large format retailer, and you may want to go somewhere else. Where is that somewhere else? And if that somewhere else would be somewhere just outside of the city, San Andreas or wherever, there would still be traffic impacts to the city. There would still be a loss of sales tax revenue. There would still be impacts on mom and pop shops and things like that, if you want to call it that. So those are things that I think we need to look at, because they're going to be knocking, if they're not knocking on the door already, they are going to be knocking on the door in Calaveras County. They're certainly knocking on our door, and we need to know if we open a door, whether we're going to open that with a guard dog or with a cup of coffee and welcome in.
I think this does raise a couple of issues that it might make sense to get some comment on from both the council and the board. First thing it raises is what exactly are we trying to attract here? Second is, where is the best place to put that? Third is, do we want to share revenues and have a cooperative relationship on it, or do we want to go our separate ways? And I think those three issues are really at the core of actually most of our kinds of discussions. We have a lot of mutual concern and mutual interest, but we have very little venue to collaborate on, or at least we have not taken advantage of those that might present themselves. I'm interested in the thinking of both council and board of supervisors on those three issues. Anybody care to comment?
I'll comment on one, just speaking as a member of the council. What I think the worst thing we can do is fail to plan. We need to realize that the impact of any large undertaking, whether it is an airport enhancement, a large format retailer, or then hopefully the soon-to-be initiated Calaveras campus of Columbia College. Each of these have proven at times to be economic engines. Each of them has also demonstrated that it can be out of control. I graduated from a college that kind of went out of control and got itself landlocked with sometimes questionable development. But each of these engines can either be an engine for good or for bad. But regardless, they will have an impact that is beyond the jurisdiction of any one government or special district. We've got, in my opinion, to look at the future in a teamwork fashion, and I take this event today as a major step in that direction, and I certainly encourage that staffs are taking the initiative to work together, as well as the Council of Governments. Each of these undertakings, this problem needs to be dealt with in an integrated fashion, but there are many specialties that need to come together, and it won't be done by single meetings, on an annual basis. So I really encourage that the area of cooperation and collaboration, each of these large initiatives should be addressed with an integrated team, and avoid the, frankly, our neighbors to the north in Amador, they took probably the #1 existing economic development site in the region. That's the old plywood factory, and they turned it into chain retail. Yeah, they generated some sales tax, but is that really the economic future for our families, for our workers, just for our residents? I think that we can do better, and that we should.
Other comments?
State your three questions again, Steve.
I was interested in, first, what we're trying to attract here. Secondly, where we could best put it. And thirdly, do we wish to do any sort of revenue sharing and collaborative planning toward those ends, or will we continue to tread our separate ways?
Well, I'll give you my 2 cents. I think Angels is a natural location, being at the crossroads of 4 and 49 for commercial. Right now, it's basically becoming a financial center. It's becoming, for the Highway 4 corridor, it's becoming a retail center with the Save Mart Shopping Center and the Long Shopping Centers. I guess you could say, well, what do we want to try to attract? I'm not sure government is very good at that. I think the marketplace is much better at deciding what consumers wish to frequent and where consumers wish to shop and spend their dollars. So to me, the question becomes, whether you want, and I don't like the term box stores because it has such a connotation built around it. I would just say, large volume retail versus boutique retail. To me, the question comes down to infrastructure and location. And I think we can find locations
at work. I suspect that's going to be either slightly above or slightly below Angels Camp, most likely on 4 or 49. I think we need to look at that. I mean, the marketplace is going to dictate a lot of this, and we can't just, we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot if we can basically outthink and outplan the marketplace. I don't think that's a particularly strong business strategy. You had one last thing. You said try to attract, you said location.
And there was a question of do we have an interest in revenue sharing or agreements that might be able to
well, in the past, if it's in the county, the city's interested in revenue sharing, and if it's in the city, the county's interested in revenue sharing. And you're always going to have commingled impact. I mean, I don't care whether Standard Red grows, people go to Angels. I mean, Bear Valley's expanding. How do you get to Bear Valley? You drive through Angels, you drive through Murphy, you drive through Arnold, you drive through Copper. None of us are up there saying kill the development or the expansion of the ski area at Bear Valley, even though we've had very limited input into that expansion. And one of the reasons is a lot of those people stop along the way and spend money in our communities, and we're all very pleased and very happy and come to enjoy our overnight accommodations, etc. So I don't think we're going to have a county say, and I don't think we should have a county say to the city every time you do something, we want to come up with a county set of mitigations to the city, and I don't think the city should say to the county every time there's development in the county that the city wants a list of mitigations by the county. I think we can have conversations, and particularly if there's significant effects. Most of these are very small cumulative effects. Residential subdivisions, some boutique retail or something. Probably the biggest impact we have is Bear Valley that we've had in some considerable period of time. But we just did redo the sales tax agreement between the city and the county. And so I guess you can say, to the extent there's an agreement, why we have a cooperative agreement. Now, if 2 or 3 large-scale retail outlets want to open in the city limits, the county might say, well, geez, this is the base of support for those retail outlets are going to be the entirety of the county, and we think we should have some impact. If they develop just on the outside of the city limits, I'm sure the city would say the same thing. So part of it depends on magnitude, and part of it, depends on kind of the estimated amount of taxes that will be generated and what we can do with their distribution. It's hard to discuss that in the abstract. You usually kind of need to have something in front of you.
well, we're just noodling conceptually today. But any other comments on those issues or any other you want to make? Russ, and then we'll move to the comments from public.
Well, I want to address your 3 questions, but also as it relates to the last item on these topics here about Copper Office development impacts. As most people know, we have a significant development underway, Castle and Cook's project at Copper Office Town Square. And that's going to be a great thing for Copper Office, and I think maybe we'll establish some sort of blueprint issues for the way things should be done in the county. Do we want to go one step farther and build large format stores in Copper Office? Our Copper Office community plan specifically hopes that we do not. That we have said in the community plan that we wanted to have retail growth occur exactly the way that it has occurred, with thematic type of structures, smaller formats, and I think that we've succeeded in that. We possibly, there may be a small fraction of people down there who would like to build a Target store or a Walmart in Copperopolis, but quite frankly, it wouldn't work there, and it shouldn't be there. It should be, like Tom was saying, a place where you've got place, and it went next door, and it really worked out very badly for the agency that I'm talking about, the entity of the city of Modesto. They had talked about, we don't want any stinking car dealers in the city of Modesto, and they got located right outside Modesto on McKinley Avenue, and it really created a kind of a vacuum of money in the city, and they were able to work out over time some reciprocity agreements, and I think that's why we're here, is to try to identify not the problems, but the potentials, and what we have the table is set in front of us, and we have some good dialogue going on here. So anyway, large stores, I think they need to be located where they will benefit the residents of the county, and then the cost sharing, I think that it has to, realistically, it has to occur. Pretty straightforward in my mind.
Thank you. Other comments?
Just hearing what Russ was talking about, kind of thinking about this, as we're thinking, where are we going, what are we doing, and so forth. Like Lee was just mentioning about all the chain stores and so forth. Why don't we think in terms of limitations, restrictions on chain stores, and focusing on trying to make Calaveras County unique in that it is specialty shops, it's local grown type shops, things like that. Try to avoid becoming like every other place. So, it seems like sometimes you keep on going to towns, you see the same stores over and over again. And, your first question was, what are we trying to attract? Actually, I think we're not even really trying. They recognize us. We've got a market now. They know the growth is coming, and they are looking at us. So I think in some ways, we maybe want to say, what are we going to try to deter? And if you look at it on the flip side, do we want to be unique? Do we want to be different? Do we want to try to set up a situation where we have a character and heritage, or it's different, that's unique to us, that is ours, or do we just allow things to come in? Because they will come in, and Tom's absolutely right. The market is going to drive it unless we get out in front of it. So those are the kind of big questions that I have that, I don't know, just think about.
I think what you're seeing is a foreshadowing of what is certainly to be the mother of all study sessions next week, when we talk about economic development. There's so many theories of economic development, and there's so many experiments out there. It would make sense to have some common purpose and some common understanding and some common information that would inform our policy bodies. So I'm very much, I don't want to belabor it here today, but I very much hope that people will participate robustly in next week's study session on the topic. There are people from the audience who wish to address these topics, and I invite them then to do so now.
Good afternoon, County and City of Angels Camp. My name is Jim Conklin. I'm the Executive Director of a recently formed business organization, Calaveras County, the Calaveras County Business Council. Got about 35 members from throughout Calaveras County. And I think, first of all, congratulations to you. The mere fact that you're sitting down and talking together about what your future is going to be, I think is a real plus, and all of you are to be congratulated sincerely for that project. I hope that continues on a regular basis. Secondly, I think all of us realize that this county faces a revenue challenge. You've seen what the governor's talking about, 10% across the board cuts. I know the county has talked about hiring moratorium. I know they've talked about budget cuts. I know that property values are going down, so the tax side of the equation, you're effectively getting less revenues than you were getting 2, 3, 4 years ago. So the whole idea of how do we address that issue, I think that's a major focus of the Business Council. I think thirdly, economic development is a partnership. It's a partnership between public and private and public. Because the private can't do what it would like to do without your cooperation relative to who are the targets, how receptive are we going to be, where is the infrastructure, et cetera. So economic development, I can't stress strongly enough, is a partnership. The Business Council is here to work with both of your organizations to address and resolve that issue. Lastly, revenue sharing, I think, I'm somewhat familiar with Amarillo County. The Martell section of Amarillo County, which sits on the top of the hill, and literally is sucking, as Mr. Perot would say, sucking the sales tax out of the city of Jackson. So they're faced with a real dilemma. So I think the focus of the Business Council is, first of all, congratulations, we need to look at economic development together. We believe there needs to be, as much as the City of Angels has done, there needs to be an economic development component within the county's general plan. Because if we're going to plan for infrastructure, we're going to plan for circulation, we're going to plan for water, we're going to plan for all the things that make a community well or not well, that economic development component really needs to be a piece of that puzzle. So we attended your last work session at the county. Obviously, we're here today. There are 4 or 5 business council members here. We're going to be at the work session next Tuesday. And we're actually collecting economic development components within general plans from various other counties. So we're going to have some of that information. I think a couple of side points. The airport. I think if you strategically look at the airport from a revenue generation standpoint, you have a real opportunity. Because light manufacturing and the distribution of product to various other places is an ideal component of that airport. You have to do it right, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity. So I think in closing, we want to work with you. Definitely want to work with you because we're all in this together. So we will be at the meeting next week, and we'll be actually sending a letter to the chairman of the Board of Supervisors as well as the mayor of Angels Camp relative to the economic development component. That I'm really happy to hear that Angels is already working on that. So we're here to help. We want to partner with you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there other members of the audience that would like to address us on this subject? Any final comments from board or council members? Yes, sir.
Jack Lynch from the City of Angels. One item that's not included here, but I think is extremely important, and that's the population projections. And that is something that has changed dramatically. In case of the City of Angels, I did a little bit of math on that, and I found that we have dropped significantly recently from what we were projecting. I'll give you some numbers. Between the years 2000 to 2005, the City of Angels is growing at a rate of 3.5% average per year. Phenomenal growth. That was a quick increase of 550 people approximately. Now, the last 2 years, that growth has dropped dramatically. We're now averaging 0.8% per year. And I look at the county numbers between 2000 and 2005. The county is growing really very rapidly at 2.1%. And now, the last 2 years, it's dropped to 1.4%. Not such a dramatic drop as in Angels. But I think discussions and concern about population projections are very, very important, particularly when you start to talk about infrastructure, water and wastewater, because they're expensive items. And you have to know, when you talk about the economic development and trying to attract new businesses here, that is a very, very complex issue, as we all know. A lot of the drive, as far as I can see in the county, has been residential growth. And home construction. And but the main thing to my mind is I think we need discussions on population projections. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Well, I guess if I might summarize.
There's someone down there.
I'm sorry.
I'd like to make one comment, one quick one. It's nice to sit here and understand that the county and the city are going to work together. I think that, and I might add that overview of everything we talked about, I believe the circulation is one of the biggest issues that we have to address. The Murphy's Grade Road, the 449 intersection, the wagon trail, the eastern part of the bypass, I hate to use that word bypass, but the eastern circulation around Angel. Those are all major issues that fit into what we're talking about. You accomplish that, maybe the rest of those fit in. And I repeat myself, I'm glad to see that the city and the county are going to work together.
I think that is a very promising development. I believe Vice Mayor Seaton has something to say as well on this, and then I'll back up.
I just want to say that I think that working together is critical, and we have forums on which we do work together already. And I think the circulation element and the regional transportation plan developed by the county governments gives us a real baseline on which to work. And as we discussed at the last COG meeting, I think moving that forward at the county is a fundamental component of synchronizing the circulation component, which is so vital to any future development and already vital to current tourism and other the quality of life as we move around the county. I think that two additional components that the COG has already worked on is the pedestrian and bicycle master plans. These, again, are elements of our overall circulation strategy. And they also have an economic generator capability in that they are quality of life recreations. And I think they expand the quality of not only the residents, but make us, again, attractive to people who want to come and share our beautiful weather, our beautiful vistas, and our natural and historical assets. So bringing all those together, I think, is an incredibly important venue. And so I think the economic development and the work that's already been identified in the new plan and other elements are really critical. And they give us a good reason to believe that we can work together and be effective in doing this.
Well, to summarize, for those of you who saw the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I believe we have contact. And now let's see how high we can fly together. I would encourage staff on these subjects that are before us to initiate or continue contact. I'm looking forward to seeing policy options developed and joint work developed, particularly around economic development and circulation and things that have been mentioned by the board and council members present. I would hope that we'd start that by meeting again jointly for the study session on economic development next week. And I would certainly like to see any work products from one entity shared with the other, so that we can begin to coordinate language, goals, policies,